Hi, this formal aspect of the rally will have a closed caption transcript summaries and auto-generated caption from Microsoft PowerPoint. Sorry for the lack of ASL. Also, for those who are watching, please think about questions throughout the rally, post reflections throughout the chat, and even if you're not physically here, we may assign for people to post on social media. Thank you so very much. We will start very shortly. Good morning. My name is Angelica Vega, she, her, and hers. Thank you all for coming to the Black Lives Matter Young People in the Movement virtual rally. We all know why we are here today, to take a stand united against police brutality and racism. As the protests evolve, we have witnessed people of every race, gender, sexuality, disability, age, status, and religious identities coming together to prioritize justice and amplify Black voices. We are fighting to become the generation that tackles and dismantles the systematic racism affecting every institution that holds power over our lives. During the age of COVID-19, we understand that many people have been unable to physically protest during the past few weeks. We must keep in mind that a lot of people with disability and transportation issues, as well as essential workers and at-risk individuals, can always show support by going to the front lines of protest. However, with a movement like this, it is absolutely crucial that everyone be included. And thankfully, there are many other ways to give support and utilize our strengths. We wanted to create this virtual space today to raise our voices and discuss ways that everybody can contribute to the Black Lives Matter movement. The murder of George Floyd was the major catalyst of recent protests that we're seeing around the country, across the world even. And from these protests, we have observed something worth noting. Protest works. All the cops involved with the killing of George Floyd has since been charged, and a calling of defunding the police has been trending and spreading like wildfire. Bills like the Justice in Policing Act of 2020 are also starting to be introduced in the House. These are first great steps, but more work needs to be done. We need to hold cops accountable and demand that our representatives do more to stop the constant trauma that cops have brought upon our communities. We also must demand justice for Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and Tony Madior. All of the Black lives that were lost to police brutality. The mistreatment and dehumanization of the Black community runs deep in this country. 401 years in this country. To us, our very existence has always been challenged by white supremacy and racism. But we are not alone in this fight. We are carrying out the work of our ancestors to one day live in a country where the color of my skin will not be a death sentence. Before I continue, I want to mention that many of our guest speakers on the line are rising giants in the realm of activism. Many of us are also part of the College in Arts and Science Leadership and Ethical Development Program, or CAS-LEAD for short. Our foundation of activism and leadership was developed and nurtured in this program. Dr. Nabina Liebow, the CAS-LEAD director, is going to present a statement about the importance of this moment in history.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nabina Liebow, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a professor at American University and teach in the Department of Philosophy and Religion. A lot of my research is actually focused on anti-racism, white supremacy, and social injustice. And as Angelica mentioned, I also direct CAS-LEAD, which is a leadership program in the College of Arts and Sciences. So Angelica invited me to say a few words, contextualizing the recent police brutality and the current response of the nation. So I'm going to be making 3 main points that I hope help frame this conversation and provide some useful background. Okay, so here's the first point. The first point is that police brutality directed at Black Americans is a symptom of a political, economic, and cultural system called white supremacy. As Francis Ansley reminds us, in this system, quote, white people overwhelmingly control power and material resources. Conscious and unconscious ideas of white superiority and entitlement are widespread, and relations of white dominance and non-white subordination are daily reenacted across a broad array of institutions and social settings, end quote. Anti-Black violence and racism is deeply ingrained into so many facets of American life. And it's going to take a lot more than police reform to end anti-Black racism. However, police reform is one very important step to tackling this larger system of white supremacy. Okay, so the second point I want to make is that historically, we've seen that one of the ways that white supremacy has managed to stick around for so long, one of the key ways it's maintained and reproduced is through violence. And in particular, violence directed at Black people. It's pretty obvious that police shootings and murders qualify as violence. But I also want you to expand your definition of violence to include other bodily harms and injustices that Black Americans face at disproportionate rates. We should think of incarceration as a form of violence. We should think about disproportionate Black deaths from COVID-19 as a form of violence. And we should think about food insecurity experienced by Black people or among Black people as violence. The violence directed towards Black people in all of its myriad forms is morally unacceptable and unjust, and works to maintain white supremacy. This is not to detract from the horror of the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, or any of the other victims of gun violence and police brutality, but instead to show that there are also other victims of state-sanctioned or state-supported violence that often get ignored, and that we should not forget them either. We should remember them. Finally, for my last point, I want to end by drawing your attention to the fact that white supremacy lives not just in our policies and institutions, but also in our everyday actions and attitudes, as well as our desires and even our emotions. When someone feels fear towards a Black person, something as intimate and fleeting as an emotional response, this too is an expression of white supremacy. And when we, as people of color, feel internalized racial oppression that manifests in emotions and feelings, this is also an expression of white supremacy. And so I invite everyone here, especially those who strive to stand in solidarity with Black citizens, to think about how you personally contribute to systems of white supremacy, and think through what you can do on a very personal, individual, emotional level to try and confront and resist this injustice. This work, as well as the work many of us are doing to reform policies and institutions, is vital and necessary to confront white supremacy and end anti-Black racism. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words, Dr. Liebow. Now I'm going to hand this off to Katie, she, her, and hers, who is going to introduce the speakers.
Thank you so much, Angelica. I am super excited to introduce all of our speakers today. With this movement, we have to uplift and listen to Black voices, especially our youth. Make this known, we are going to be the future. Ajayi is going to be our first speaker. Ajayi Pickering-Haynes, he, him, his, is the founder and main contributor of the Finding Your Voice blog platform. He is an emerging thought leader and champion for self-care, soul work, and self-reflecting in silence. Mr. Pickering-Haynes has confidently solidified his position in the blog writing space through groundbreaking content like Manifest That Ish, like our ancestors did, and I Quit My Job to Empower Myself, as well as being featured on State of the Territory News and American University's College of Arts and Sciences Achievement websites.
Thank you so much, Katie, for that introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and so I'm going to get right into it. Life has a way of consistently reminding us of what's truly important, what matters. It's apparent that the current state of this nation has put many things into perspective. It has put life and death into perspective in more ways than one. We've been stopped in our tracks, and for some, finally forced to pay attention to what's happening beyond our homes, jobs, and own communities. As a firm believer of everything starting with the internal work, I have a few questions for everyone here today. I want you all to take a few seconds to answer these questions in your own head. What is it that you value? What matters to you most? What do you truly care about? Though distinct, your answer to these questions should be grounded in the value you hold in your own humanity, your own humanness. To truly value your own humanness is to value the sacredness of any other human being. It comes with the fundamental understanding that the dignity and respect that I value in being human comes from my commitment to ensuring that every other human being is granted the same. We cannot say that America is a land of dignity, respect, and sacredness until the humanity of Black people from every walk of life is acknowledged with empathy, compassion, accountability, humility, justice, reparations, reform, and equity. I urge every self-proclaimed ethical leader, influencer, model citizen, servant, advocate, speaker, entrepreneur, philanthropist, student, change agent, and role model to re-examine what matters most to them. If keeping Black people alive and safe are not a part of the causes you are championing and standing behind, then you cannot call yourself a defender of humanity in any capacity. While I have your attention, I'm not going to use this opportunity that I've been humbly granted to use the resilience, accomplishments, culture, and magic of my brothers and sisters with African heritage to defend our humanity. Our existence is not conditional. We are in the midst of 2 pandemics, but only one is being recognized as a national public health issue. And even the one that's being recognized as such is also disproportionately affecting the lives of poor Black people. If you don't take away anything from being here today, please take away this. Your voice is the single most powerful tool that you have. I'm so proud to be part of a movement where young people are recognizing the value of that. We are not simply witnessing a revolution occur. We are the revolution. Your voice altered the social media algorithm. Your voice channeled pain into purpose. And your voice created art that are symbol centerpieces for the movement. This virtual protest is proof of how our activism and active resistance looks many ways and takes many forms. This is a time of reckoning. In this time of reckoning, our actions need to reflect values that go beyond physical and monetary support. Folks in positions of privilege and power need to dig deep into themselves. As a Black man, I recognize that the internal work that I need to do includes creating more space for Black women's voices to be amplified in this movement. Until those of you who have the privilege of not worrying about making it home safe from a routine traffic stop, deeply evaluate your own consciousness, my descendants will inevitably pay the same price my ancestors did. Say their names: Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and so many others, so many others. Thank you.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you so much for speaking. Your words will change the world someday, and I agree that we are the revolution. I can't wait to introduce our second speaker, Nick. Nick McCauley, he, him, his, is a fall 2019 graduate of American University with a BS in International Business and Business Entertainment. Given his talents as an effective leader, strategic communicator, and a champion for social activism, he was awarded the Presidential Letter of Commendation signed by Barack Obama for his community service efforts in Hamtramck, Michigan. Nick has received scholarly honors from various organizations, including the Executive Leadership Council, for his proposals on broadening diversity and inclusion efforts in the workplace, having worked at a variety of reputable broadcasts, including CBS News and A Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Nick aspires to use his passions for social activism and journalistic media production to mitigate social injustice through bridging the knowledge gap.
Thank you so much, Katie, for that introduction. And also thank you to Angelica, and thank you to everybody who kind of put this whole thing together for us to kind of share this information with you guys, to give us a platform to just kind of express what we're feeling right now. So for me, I'll just start off with the story. I was 12 years old, and it was a sunny day in April, the sunniest I'd ever seen in that year. And so when my parents announced that we'd be going on another family drive to ride and look, as they called it, I protested. I wanted to play outside with my friends in the neighborhood. I wanted to see if I could find some new adventure in the backyard. I longed for excitement because that's just who I was as a child. And I didn't want to ride around with old people looking at boring old like buildings and boring old streets in a boring old car just because it was family time. You know, I had hopes, I had dreams, I had plans. But alas, I was 12. So I conceded and I went with them anyway. And I had fun. It started as a picture-perfect day with my picture-perfect parents. And looking back, I wouldn't change a moment for that reason. But what I didn't know at the time was how that day would grow to become one of the most deeply traumatic and eye-opening events of my life. So I remember we were riding on the freeway when my mother spotted 2 unmarked police cars in the rearview mirror that had been behind us for roughly 8 miles. There was no indication that they were following us. There were no sirens, there were no lights. They weren't even directly behind our vehicle. But my mother sensed something was awry, so she decided to pull off at the next exit and into the parking lot of a Home Depot. And surely enough, her suspicions were confirmed when the officers pulled off and came right behind us. So upon parking, 3 officers jumped out of their vehicle, guns in hand, and they rushed us. I will never forget my mother's terrified shrieks as they pointed their guns at her head and my father's heads. And I will never forget her pleading with them that we, a family of 3, had committed no crimes, and certainly not any worth being held at gunpoint. But they ignored her, and as they ignored her pleas and ordered them both out of the car, my mother, as a last-ditch effort, screamed that she had her only child in the back seat, and that given his presence, they were unable to commit whatever crime of which they were being accused, which we didn't know at the time because we hadn't been told. It was at that moment an officer claiming that he had to verify the age and identity of everyone in the car because he didn't believe my mother, opened my rear door with gun pointed and questioned me about the integrity of my parents' claim that I was their child. That was the first time I'd ever seen a gun. The first time I'd ever seen a gun, I was 12, and it was pointed at my face by men I'd been taught to trust with my safety. Without a moment's notice and without a moment's warning, I felt what so many of my people feel daily navigating the systemic injustice that's in our country. Pure, unbridled terror. This indescribable fear at the thought that I might lose everything, that I might lose my family, and I might even lose my life for a crime I knew nothing about and didn't commit. But I'm alive. I'm here today speaking with all of you, but I was one of the lucky ones. If I were a year older, I could have ended up like 13-year-old Tamir Rice, who was instantly gunned down by a police officer for playing with a toy gun in a park. If I were a bit older and a bit heavier, I could have ended up like Eric Gardner, who was tackled and suffocated by 4 officers without resisting for selling cigarettes. If I were a woman, I could have been mistakenly shot to death because the officers didn't get the right vehicle, a la the death of Breonna Taylor, who died at the hands of police officers conducting a raid at the wrong house. I could have been a news headline just like them. You all would have been shouting my name, crying for justice from a legal and judicial system that has proven its prejudices and failures against my people time and time again. I think we all know why we're here. It's because we've been here before. We've had these conversations, we've had these dialogues, as we call them, countless times for the better part of half a century. We had them with Sandra Bland, we had them with Trayvon Martin, we had them with Michael Brown when he got shot and killed. We had them before. We know why we're here. But the question is, how can we never be here again? And the answer to that is by addressing the root of racism and internalized prejudice in this country and how it's implemented in our daily lives, and what methods we have to undertake to eradicate it completely from the system. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter how you treat and how you mitigate the symptoms of a disease. If you don't address the cause, it can never be cured. So how do we get here? Is the question. Why in 2020 is authoritative and systematic brutality against Black people still authorized? The answer to that is simple. It's a mindset. It's the learned association of our Black skin with danger, with aggression, with violence. And we see it all around us. We're bombarded with it every day in television, news, films, social media, and radio. For generations, you have been told that Black people are the real-life monsters you should fear when you're walking home alone at night, when you're sitting alone in your car. That Blackness in and of itself is a proxy for suspicion and deceit. And it's this indoctrination that is responsible for the blatant disregard for Black life that we see enacted by those in positions of power. It breeds a lack of empathy towards our struggle. When we are consistently portrayed as looters and rioters, as thugs and criminals, it becomes easier and easier to dehumanize us, to make our lives and our lived experiences lesser than. And the results of that? Well, it's being assaulted in the street by police officers. It's being hunted down like animals while we're jogging. It's being chained up by the ankles to the backs of vehicles and drugged through the streets until death. Racism and prejudice are taught and reinforced to all of us through filthy lies disguised as factual truths. And its spread does not only shape the minds of white Americans, it doesn't only shape harmful legislation. The narratives were sold by media outlets, politicians, and even our own family members and peers about the nature of Blackness shapes Black people as well. So when I was in preschool, I had a white teacher. Her name was Miss Lindsay. And while in school one morning, I was playing with a white girl in my class when she called me over to speak with her. She told me to my face that lighter faces were better than darker faces. And since that was the case, I should stop playing with my friend and play with one of the other darker skinned children. And of course, being the impressionable child I was, taught to respect authority, I just internalized her words as fact. And I went to play with the other dark-skinned children. So when I got home that evening, I mentioned this to my mother in passing, and she was outraged, understandably so. But not only was she outraged, she was panicked at the fact that a white authority figure that her son was spending the majority of his days with was feeding him a narrative of inferiority at such a young age. So the next morning she went with me to school, and she asked to speak to Miss Lindsay in the hallway. There she had an amicable conversation with her, explaining her wrongdoing, and by the end of the conversation, they hugged and they parted ways. But then, when my mother was 10 feet down the hallway, Miss Lindsay began screaming at the top of her lungs that she was being assaulted and that she needed help and that my mother was attacking her. My mom was, of course, shocked at this, but she was even more shocked and heartbroken when I came running out of the classroom screaming, "Mommy, Mommy, leave Miss Lindsay alone!" To which Miss Lindsay shot my mother a malicious smile of satisfaction. Why? Because the seed that she wanted to plant was planted. Her job was done. This type of conditioning that we all receive is poison. It's the poison that has corrupted the minds of authority figures that enact and enforce legislation that disproportionately impact Black people. It's the poison that's spread when Black protesters are categorized as looters and vandals and rioters by politicians and media outlets. It's the poison that makes it easy for the murder investigations of unarmed innocents like Ahmaud Arbery to be stifled by corrupt police precincts. It's the poison that makes it easy for prejudiced white people to weaponize police forces against Black people. And it's the same poison that's used as justification for inaction by those with the privilege and the platform to make a difference and choose not to. These learned behaviors have not been uprooted as quickly as my mother, my father, or my grandparents would have hoped. And in all honesty, I'm not sure how quickly we'll be able to uproot them. But these recent killings should register as a sign that it's time for all of us to get together and do the work. And while a part of that work consists of using your voice to bring attention to these issues in your respective communities, the other part of that work is dismantling the policies that allow for this poison to be used against the Black community. We should be asking ourselves what tangible reform of the system should look like. For example, there's a law called qualified immunity. It was introduced in 1967 and was designed to shield officers from liability when acting in something called good faith. As of today, it still stands and it assists in making it easier for officers to kill and injure civilians with impunity, allowing leeway for more brutality to continue. This is something that needs to be changed. Ahmaud Arbery was gunned down while jogging in February. And because the white supremacists that killed him were former officers as well, the precinct in charge of the investigation covered up the video evidence until it was leaked online 3 months later. Only then were the murderers arrested and the investigation conducted. That needs to be changed. When claims of brutality and misconduct are filed against officers, Internal Affairs is supposed to hold them accountable. But for some reason, officers that have multiple complaints filed against them are still allowed to be employed. That needs to be changed. Maybe the best course of action is to abolish legislation like qualified immunity. Maybe the best course of action is to instate a third-party elected committee to investigate officers and mitigate corruption in the force. Changes like these are what need to be brought to fruition. But the Black community cannot impact this change on its own, and we shouldn't have to. We have to see these institutional injustices as what they are. They're human rights violations. We need vocal white allies who are willing to dedicate themselves to helping secure the same unalienable rights they receive to all Americans. Martin Luther King Jr., the activist that moderates like to bring up in their criticism of the outrage being expressed across the country today, once said this, and I quote, "I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. The Negro's great stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than justice. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will," end quote. So today, I'm imploring you, if you are white, if you're a white person living in America, it pains me to break this to you, it does, but you have an inherent advantage that my people do not. The systems we fight against to succeed were designed for you to succeed. The social benefits you reap from your whiteness are paralleled only by the limitations we must overcome for our Blackness. Your skin color affords you the ability to be heard in spaces that are inaccessible to us. For peace and order to be reinstated, justice has to be had. And while we have made a measurable amount of impact on our own as a community, we need you. It's important that you realize that this is just as much your fight as it is ours. We're your neighbors, we're your friends, we're your family. And it's time that you not only hear our cries for humanity, but walk with us on the path to it. It's time that you actively prevent the disease that is racism and prejudice from poisoning your children and killing ours. Evil prevails when good men stay silent. I'm telling you today, asking you, please don't stay silent. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much for sharing and speaking up. Your stories were amazing. We must have accountability in this country. And please, for everyone who is on the line, speak up and call out racism when you see it. Lastly, I'm super excited to introduce Bayadir. Bayadir Mohamed-Osman, she, her, hers, is a Sudanese-American public health professional and poet based in Maryland. She graduated from American University with a bachelor's in public health. She has dedicated her life to researching and preventing health disparities. As a spoken word artist, she has competed at College Union's Poetry Slam Invitational alongside AU's Speak Fresh, raking in over 1 million views. Bayadir's moving messages have been featured on Now This, and she has won several poetry competitions in the DMV. She has performed in Philly, Denver, Dallas, and Los Angeles, to name a few cities. Her poetry examines her intersectional identity as a Black Muslim Sudanese woman. She uses her platform and voice to advocate for marginalized communities in her home country, Sudan. Her debut book, Secondhand Smoke, will be published May 2020.
Thank you so much for the introduction. An open letter to complicit racist. Dear bystander, how does it feel to breathe? How does it feel to float? Your steps are light. I am carrying generations on my shoulders. How does it feel to have translucent skin? I sink, you float, and you don't offer a hand. If I scream, I'm angry Black woman. If I kneel quietly, I'm ungrateful. I've never been taught how to swim in an ocean full of sharks. There isn't a manual on how to be Black in America. I have everything to lose if I fight. My silence is due to survival. Yours is for comforts. I stand up to my rights. I stand up for my rights to an officer. I risk my life. I march in the streets. I risk my freedom. I complain in corporate America. I risk my paycheck. What do you risk other than comfort and privilege? Being Black is learning how to blend in for survival. Being Black woman is to breathe when no one is looking. I don't fear the lyncher, nor the white hooded terrorist, but the bystander. I fear you, the one that records my death and watches it over and over and over, the one that uses our movement as a photo op, the one that comes to my family's funeral and yells, "All lives matter," the one that is outraged over property destruction rather than human protection. Lynchers are murderers, but who gave them the rope? Derek Chauvin played Angel of Death, but who gave him the badge? Who taught him how to steal? I am not surprised when a murderer kills, but I am when bystanders are silent for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I fear the Amy Coopers, the CEOs that stamp diversity and inclusion on their walls but don't rebuild the infrastructure. If a violent racist stabs me, at least I'll expect it. But what about the doctor who doesn't believe my illness, the banker who doesn't approve my loan, the journalist that searches for my criminality before my humanity? I know what to expect when I see the KKK, but what about those that wash their hoods? Jim Crow would have just been a bill if he wasn't brought to life by bystanders. Lynch mobs haven't stopped, they've just become televised. To the bystanders, I don't need you to check in on me. Check your racist family, question your workplace culture, write a check, challenge your implicit bias, redistribute your privilege, relearn history, listen, and then listen more. Bystanders' silence is the language of the oppressor. Don't you think it's time to finally stand?
That was so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom. Now back to you, Angelica.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers and Katie for introducing them. As you're here today, this is a call to action for a long-lasting change. We all have something to contribute to this movement, even if some of us cannot be in the front line. Susanna, she and her and hers, is going to tell us ways to get involved.
Hi all. We find ourselves here today because we want to show up. We want to step up, and yet sometimes it can feel hard to know how to. In a time when social gathering and organizing is dangerous because of COVID-19, we need to find innovative ways of doing the work. So what can we do? The people at the front lines and organizations supporting them always need one thing: money. Whether it be to pay bail when arrested, building a medic station for protesters, or putting pressure on politicians to change policies, they all need as much financial support as they can get. This is just a short list of some of the organizations and activities you can donate to. But there are numerous Google documents being distributed on social media that keep getting updated on what organizations are doing the work. Every one of us is at different stages of this movement. Some of us are just becoming aware of our roles in the system and how we can work against racism. Others have been reading and consuming information about this for some time now. And some are already actively organizing and/or have supported these efforts for years now. Regardless of where you are, we have listed here a couple of things to inform ourselves about anti-racism history and work. Finally, one of the most important things we can do is advocate. Use social media to promote hashtags, messages, events, and organizations that are doing this work. Sign petitions, write emails to your local politicians and representatives, or even call them. These are all things we can do to advocate for the changes that we want to see, which is essential in order to put pressure on the people at the top. Finally, it is really important to emphasize that as much as we are riled up right now, we need to hone this fire to make sure that we can continue to do this work long after today. This will not be an overnight thing, but a long journey for justice. So remember, this is not a one-time thing. Keep being an ally and keep pushing for long-lasting change.
Thank you so much, Susanna, in showing us what actions we can take on a community and federal level. We will turn now to Madior, he, him, and his, who will explain to us why and how we must fight for both the change of attitudes as well as institutions.
I believe that true progress won't be made unless policy and law changes are made at the government level. I believe that policy change is important because we have been protesting against racial injustice for decades, and it has been a very difficult process. There were protests in LA for Rodney King in 1992. There were protests in Ferguson, and now this. Each follows the same pattern. An unarmed Black man is attacked, we protest, then we do the same thing all over again once the next person is attacked. Unfortunately, many in the American government and police force don't care about Black lives, no matter how much we fight against injustice. To be honest, when I found out about the news, I felt discouraged from doing anything because this isn't new. I felt helpless, because even if I did try to make a difference, those who have authority, whether it be Congress, the president, the police, or politicians, don't care about my opinion and will keep repeating the same problematic behavior. Unfortunately, when these protests happen, the people who get hurt the most are the protesters themselves, either injured or arrested, and the businesses that are destroyed. The police continue to be corrupt because no one has put in place new laws and guidelines. Protesting is only the first half of the mission, but not many have done the second half, which is actual policy change. This generation has yet to see a new civil rights leader or coalition, a person who can stand as a symbol for the movement, as well as interact directly with government officials. At the individual level, reach out to local politicians, congressmen, and civil rights activists. Suggest new ideas for systems of law and thought which can be directly implemented. Examples of ways to reach out would be contacting Congress. The US Congress itself has a general number that you can actually call with an operator who can direct you to the person you want to contact. For individual politicians, many have their own campaign websites which have contact information from their representatives, either a phone number or an email. When interacting with people of influence, these are the key points we need to focus on. Ensuring the protection of all targeted and minority groups. Those who are responsible for a hate crime should have no leniency in terms of how they are judged and tried. Ensure strict protocol for police when interacting with the public. No use of excessive violence. Accumulate the financial resources needed in order to implement these changes, as well as fund the appropriate organizations and groups, as well as supporting Black-owned news outlets. If you're a person of privilege, politically, socially, or economically, use that privilege to influence the people in power. If you're a person of wealth, use those resources to support politicians. And finally, if you're very passionate about these issues, consider being politically engaged sometime in the future. For all we know, one of you could become a future congressman or congresswoman, political figure, or influential activist. If you feel as though progress isn't being made, if you feel as though this country has reached a standstill, take it upon yourself to be the change you want to see.
Thank you so much, Madior, and thank you to all of our wonderful speakers on this line today. You hear our voices and stories and our calls to actions, and now it is now up to us to go back and keep the fire lit. This is not just a one-day thing. It is a lifetime commitment to push for radical changes in how we construct our society. Remember two things. First, do not be silent in any space you occupy, because silence echoes acceptance, which is the voice of the oppressor. And second, when you engage with activism, intersectionality between race, gender, sexuality, disability, religious identity, status, and age is a must. So speak up and amplify every voice continuously, demanding justice for George Floyd and all of the Black lives that were lost over the years. After this rally, we'll be sharing a list of resources that we have created over the past week. Use this resource list as a starting point, not an ending point. Thank you so much for coming to this virtual rally. I had to give big thanks to all the volunteers that made this possible, both on this list and off. And also, if you want to contact Dr. Nabina Liebow, here is her contact information on the slide and on the chats. Black Lives Matter. Let us keep this energy going. Please ask our speaker any question. Please be respectful. And once again, thank you all for coming.